morning, everybody, officially. For those of you who haven't been on a lunch bunch before, my name is Karen Solheim. I'm on the part of the GAE-Retired organization. Of course, our lunch bunch is open to any GAE member. So we are so glad you are here today. And I'm really excited that we have our Director of Government Relations, Joe Fleming, with us. And Joe and I communicate early and often sometimes about things. And as Joe goes through and speaks with us today about what might be happening in the upcoming General Assembly, please realize that Joe is just the messenger in all of this. And he is on our team and does an excellent job down at the Capitol, reaching across the aisles for both education and retirement issues that impact us. So this lunch bunch, as all of them are, is being recorded. So if you miss something, it'll be on the GAE-Retired YouTube channel. You can email me. I'll put my contact info later on in the chat if you want to look at something again. And Joe, thank you for everything you do, and including being great to work with and especially working with the GAE-Retired organization. So you're on, my friend.
Thank you, Karen. And there's not a group I like to work with more than you guys. Y'all are real difference makers. You're dedicated. When we need grassroots calls to the Capitol, you guys are at the front of the line getting the job done, and it really makes my job a lot easier. So we're at that point of the year where the legislative session is about to begin. It will begin next Monday, the same day, Mary Alice and Karen, as the national championship game. The word from the Capitol is that they will meet briefly on Monday. There are legislators, and I'm sure there are lobbyists that are flying out to California for the game. They may not meet the following day, Tuesday. If they do meet, it'll be once again another kind of pro forma session where we basically convene and then adjourn right away. I'm not sure about Wednesday, but they are making accommodations for those who are going to the national championship game on Monday. So I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share with you guys. And can you see that?
In 5 for not coming up.
Let's see here. My computer's acting funky. Oh, there we go. Now I got it.
And
how about now?
It is on the screen. Lovely.
Excellent. So I like to work this way. If you have questions as we go along, feel free to ask them and interrupt me. There is a lot going on this year. I think I just got a crash notice, but it didn't. Sorry. Am I still?
Yes.
Okay. What is going on? There you go. Do not ask again. How about that? Okay.
And there you are, Joe. I think you froze.
Yeah, I don't, so I apologize. I'm not sure quite what's going on, but let's get back into it. So the theme of the early part of this session is going to be, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. Theme of this PowerPoint is going to be, or of this legislative session, at least initially, is, whoa, there's a lot of changes going on. So, for example, we have a new leadership in the House and Senate. You may know that the current or the previous Speaker of the House, David Ralston, passed away a few days after the election. The Republicans have already nominated John Burns. He has been the majority leader. he won't officially become the Speaker of the House until they convene and the entire chamber votes on it. But since the Republicans control the House of Representatives, there's no doubt that John Burns will be the next Speaker. He's a guy from down around Effingham County, Screven County, Eastern Georgia. He's not somebody who's served on a lot of the committees that we've worked with. He's not, for example, on education. I don't believe he's on retirement either. So we've got an important figure there we've got to get to know and look forward to working with. There also is a new president of the Senate. By Constitution in Georgia, the lieutenant governor is the de facto president of the Senate. So he serves as lieutenant governor and the key chief leader of the Senate. That's Burt Jones. He, as you may know, won his race for lieutenant governor. We've worked with Senator Jones some in the past. He actually has a history where he's voted, for example, against vouchers in the past. More recent votes, he's switched his vote, but he's going to be leading the Senate as somebody critical that we need to work with. So with changes in leadership and changes in the composition of both chambers, we're going to likely see new committee chairmen for a number of our key committees. I think there's a possibility, but there's no confirmation, that we may have a new chairman of the House Education Committee. That's currently Matt Dubnik. You know, education, as important as it is to us, is not necessarily the sexiest committee for legislators. And I think Chairman Dubnik might have aspirations for what he considers a bigger committee. He is vice chairman. He's vice chairman, I think, of the Rules Committee. I don't think the Rules Committee is going to change, but we could see a new House Education Committee chairman. We already knew before the election that half of the members of the House Education Committee were not returning. They either were running for another office or retired. So we knew even before the general election that we got a lot of new faces to get to know, and we may not know until after Monday who actually is going to be appointed to serve on the House Education Committee. Retirement. John Carson may remain as the chairman of the House Retirement Committee, but he may see something bigger he wants. And of course, as these members increase in seniority, they may have more of a case to take on what is considered a bigger committee, a better committee in their eyes. Those are usually committees that determine how the state spends its money. We already know that we're going to have a new Senate Retirement Committee chairman. That's been a guy named Randy Robertson from around Columbus. Randy was recently recently elected to Republican leadership in the Senate, rather. So we're going to have a new Retirement Committee chairman in the Senate. I don't have any idea who that's going to be. Again, in the House and Senate, it's possible that the new leadership will announce their committee chairman before they actually convene on the 9th, but it may be after Monday before we know who that new chairman is. And obviously, we want to get GAE-Retired down at the Capitol to meet the new Senate Retirement Committee chairman, and possibly to meet with the existing, or if there is a new House Retirement Committee chairman as well. The Appropriations Committee is also critical to public education. This is the committee that determines how tax dollars are spent. They essentially prepare a budget and determine how that money is going to be spent. It's important to know, and I'll hit on this a little more in the future, that only 3 times in the last 20 years have we not seen a cut in public education. So 3 times they fully funded QBE, 17 times in the last 20 years they've not. Matt Hatchett from Dublin, Georgia, has been announced as the new Appropriations Committee chairman. We have a relationship with him, but again, he's not someone who has historically served on committees that were in our wheelhouse. Blake Tillery, who is the Senate chairman for appropriating. He is going to be back. Blake's good, he's fair. And I'll talk a little bit more about him and the appropriations in the future. So we talked about leadership in the state Senate. There are 10 new senators. 10 of 56 are new to that chamber. Just for noting, Democrats picked up 1 seat in the Senate. In the House of Representatives, there are 43 new state representatives. So again, our job early on is we got a lot of new folks to meet. Some of these candidates we supported in the election and got to know during the election. That gives us an advantage. And if you're keeping score of the partisan control, Democrats picked up 2. There was some talk early on that the Democrats might pick up as many as 6 new seats, but they did in fact pick up 2. So while all this is going on, we've got new leadership, we may have new composition of committees. There are actually actually 4 special elections still to determine who is going to be seated in the General Assembly. We had one in December. Representative Henry Wayne Howard from around Augusta passed away. If I'm correct, I think his son won that seat. So I look forward to getting to know him. Yesterday, there was a special election for David Ralston's seat up in Blue Ridge, Georgia, in the North Georgia mountains. Speaker Ralston's wife, Sherry, ran for that, but she did not receive a majority of the votes, so there'll be a runoff in that election. She won a large plurality, but not a majority. And then we have 3 other special elections that are coming up for the end of this month. I got 2 of them paired together, Senate District 7 and House District 172. Calvin, I'm sure you're familiar with these races. These are down in your part of the state. Senate District 7 is Burt Dean's seat. He's a senator. He has taken a position leading one of the state agencies. So his Senate seat is open. One of the candidates for his seat is Sam Watson, state representative from around Colquitt County in Moultrie, Georgia. So we've got Sam, the state representative, running for the Senate district and other candidates. And then we also have a special election for Sam's seat. So all those are down in South Georgia. The Senate district basically runs from the Alabama line, Alabama, Florida, that corner of the state, Bainbridge, up to near Moultrie. And then we have another one in House District 119 that's come available because there's some alleged malfeasance by the guy that won in November. So we've got really 4 special elections to be determined. So that's 4 new members in addition to everything else that we've talked about. Anybody have any questions so far? Calvin, any comments on those races down in your area?
Who is it? Are they Democrats or Republicans running for the representative seat that is also moved and running for Senate?
Yeah, good question. So in the Senate district, there's a Libertarian, there's a Democrat, and there's a Republican running. In the House district, there's, to my knowledge, the only candidate that qualified is a Republican. I think his name is Charles Cannon. So if what I have as of last night is accurate, and I think qualifying is ended, there's only 1 candidate running for that House special election, but 3 are running for that Senate seat down your way. Okay,
I was talking to Senator Freddie Sims the other night, and the representative seat was she was not sure. So you're saying for sure that it's a Republican running?
I'm pretty certain that's accurate, but I will double check that. As of last night, and I think qualifying had it ended Friday. The only candidate qualified for that House seat is a Republican. We will be sending questionnaires to all of the candidates for these special elections. And in Calvin, it's critical that we get our county affiliates down in that part of the state together if they choose to interview candidates to make a recommendation, because we can't make a because we can't endorse and we can't contribute unless we have a recommendation from the locals, as well as a questionnaire completed by the candidate.
Okay.
So, so that's where we are in that situation.
Now we don't have a PAC locally, but I'll gladly work with the local that has a PAC, because that's key that we all have.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, we had a voice with Senator Burt, so and I'm very disappointed. Well, I'm actually disappointed because we knew we had a voice with him. Here we are having to reach out, but it's fine. And so that's why I'm willing to work with Colquitt County and whoever, and so we can get a handle on this new guy that was a representative that's running for Senate, at least, see who wins. We need to be interviewing all of the candidates.
Right. Just to let you know, and then we can visit offline if you want. The counties in that Senate district are Colquitt, Decatur, Early, Grady, Miller, Mitchell, Seminole, and Thomas. And I know we got some organization in Colquitt, Decatur, Grady, and I think Thomas County as well. So we can visit more on that, but we need to get the candidates to complete the questionnaire. I need to get them to them today, and then try to get the local down there to at least put together a Zoom interview with those candidates. One of the big things every session is the budget and
Joe,
how public education.
before you move on, Patrick has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
Let me unmute. I was watching the news and they were talking about the special election of the guy that was stealing drugs from the nursing home.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, there's not going to be any Democrat running in that position, right? Or have they announced any possibility there that maybe we could get somebody that's more friendly to public education?
And that's a good question, and Happy New Year, Patrick. In that race, which I believe is kind of in the Winder, Barrow County area, there are 3 qualified candidates, and they're all Republicans. Yeah. So I'll be honest with you, in the Senate district down in South Georgia, in the House district in South Georgia, in this Winder Barrow district, they're pretty Republican areas. Doesn't mean a Democrat can't win, but in 2 of those 3, you only have Republicans. The Senate district is the only one where a Democrat's running down in South Georgia, but that's it. They're Republican districts now. You know, if I had to bet money, I would probably bet that they're likely to take all 3, but we'll see what happens. And certainly if we endorse, we'll endorse the one that's best qualified and most able to represent public education in the General Assembly. By the way, the runoff in David Ralston's seat also in the runoff for 2 Republicans running. So you got 2 Republicans running the runoff there. Budget, that's one of the critical issues every year. You know, how do we spend our tax dollars? Budgets are a reflection of the legislators' priorities. What do they value? What do they want to fund? And as I said before, public education is one of those things they cut when times are lean. This session is not going to feel like times are lean because there's still federal COVID dollars running around, because the economy in Georgia and unemployment are kind of low. The revenues are good. So you probably won't see, I'm hoping and believe that QBE will be fully funded. Now, fully funding QBE does not mean it's well funded or appropriately funded. It means basically the minimum level of funding necessary to keep public schools operating. And again, as I said before, their history is cut, 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 cut. One of the things that concerns me about this session is because it'll feel like to them they've got tons of money. Again, thanks to the federal COVID aid that's still in the system, and thanks to a reasonably strong economy and revenues, they're gonna try to do things like cut taxes again and do tax rebates. The governor's already proposed, frankly, Stacey Abrams did too, $1 billion tax cut. So once you start taking $1 billion tax cut, and this past year they did $1 billion tax cut and $1 billion property tax relief. When you start taking billions out for tax cuts and tax rebates, you're leaving less and less money. And you're leaving less and less money with tax cuts for the future. So my fear is they're setting themselves up for a next year, 2024 and beyond, when we're not going to have all that federal COVID aid, when the economy could be tighter than it is now, and they're going to be forced to cut. And where do we know in history they like to cut? And that's public education. So we will be advocating for certainly the minimum level funding for QBE, but also there has been a Senate study committee this year on education funding, where Lisa testified. We were in Athens on a Sunday morning because that's when the committee chose to meet, advocating for additional pay raises for education support professionals, for teachers. There's a proposal going around that's gaining some attention to give school districts that have a high number of students who live in poverty additional money. There's a critical lack of counselors. So there's plenty that needs to be funded. And some of it may get funded this year, but because again, they're taking so much money off the table in tax cuts that will be permanent for the future, that it's going to make it more challenging in the future to fund public education at the level it needs. So there's a lot to be done there, and we've got a new chairman to work with. I do think in Blake Tillery, the Senate Appropriations Chairman, who's from Vidalia area, got a guy who's fiscally prudent. He's been on our side on a couple of issues, including like vouchers, not always, but sometimes. But we have somebody that we can at least make our case to. So the budget situation is going to be critical. Traditionally, the governor on Wednesday or Thursday of next week would make his budget proposal official. He's actually required by the state constitution to submit a budget to the General Assembly. And then that goes to the committees where they can mark it up. They could rewrite it completely. They can accept it with some small changes, but it always starts with the governor's blueprint. So that will be a critical concern. In the last 3, 4, maybe even longer years, the week of the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, the second week of the General Assembly, usually they do not meet as a body, as a chamber, but usually during that week, the budget committees will meet to begin to review 2 budgets. They do 2 budgets every year. They make, first of all, adjustments to the current year budget. So for public education, that often means checking the FTE, the number of students enrolled, and if the budget needs more money to accommodate it, or they think less, they'll make adjustments there. And then they prepare a new budget for the 2023-2024 year. So there'll be 2 budgets, as there are every year, going on during the process. As I mentioned before, you know, we saw this 3 years ago, right before COVID, when the House of Representatives wanted to make it a choice between funding QBE fully or a tax cut. They are infatuated with tax cuts. I'd love a tax cut, but again, I think things like public education and other critical spending priorities are going to suffer from that. There was a recent poll by AJC, and GAE's own polling shows that the public would prefer spending more on education than tax cuts. These tax cuts, even though they're $1 billion total, often amount to pocket change for most Georgians. So I think a few years ago, a tax cut of about 0.5% was implemented, and it was essentially $23 a year per taxpayer. So we have a strong message to make there in preserving and improving our public education through additional funding. But it may be, in some legislators' mind, a choice between cutting taxes and spending more on public education. I mentioned that the Senate held a study committee this year on education funding. A number of key points were made. There should be a report coming from that committee at some point this year. It was chaired by Mike Dugan from the Carrollton area. Nan Orrock, one of our friends, was on the committee. Blake Tillery, the appropriations chairman, or finance committee chairman, was on it. The committee heard from Lisa and a number of other folks. Stephen Owens, one of our friends at the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. A couple of the key points that we all made were, again, additional funding for school districts with a high number of students living in poverty, address the shortage of not only teachers, but ESPs through salary increases and retirement benefits. And I'll talk about that in a second. And address some of the things that were raised in the Georgia Department of Education study on burnout that was released this year. I don't have the link in front of me right now, but you can easily find it by Googling Georgia Department of Education burnout study. And it is a fascinating report on those stresses and pressure points that they're making our teachers and ESPs' lives much more difficult in these times. And, you know, one of the things, for example, that was raised as a point of stress and burnout was high class sizes. And if you've heard me or Lisa or any number of folks speak, part of that can be tied to waivers, where school districts can get an exemption, a waiver, so they can ignore the state laws on class sizes. And many districts are increasing number of students in classes because of that. And in part, in a weird way of addressing the shortage of educators. So the burnout study can be a positive tool for us to use to advocate some of the things we are. But those are some of the things that we advocated for, including, as I said before, counselors and other programs of key need. It would not be a legislative session without another voucher bill, which I expect we'll see this year. Last year was noteworthy because we had 2 voucher bills that were universal in their application. Currently in Georgia, the special needs voucher pertains to students that have certain medical conditions or learning disabilities. The advocates for vouchers try to expand it every year to include more and more students. Their end objective is what they have in Arizona. And in Arizona, any student in that state can get $6,000 to pay for their private school education, $6,000 a year. Last year in Georgia, for the first time, that's what we saw in Georgia, was a bill that was not just limited to medical disabilities or learning disabilities, but would apply to any kid in the state. Who knows what the financial cost for something that would be? You have no idea how many kids would sign up for it or families. So I expect to see these kind of universal voucher bills in both chambers coming this year. And I think it's time to draw the line and say there should be no more tax breaks or private school voucher expansion. In fact, we were able to extract from some legislators, key legislators, that they would not act on additional vouchers unless QBE was fully funded. So hopefully, if we'll see what happens on funding, but that's one thing. The other thing that came up last year that we were knee deep and fought our asses off for was a tax break. There's a tax break in Georgia code. you get a tax break just for sending your kids or just for donating rather to private schools. So not only do you get state tax dollars, your neighbor's tax dollars to incentivize sending your kids to private school, you also get a nice healthy tax break for contributing to that private school. Just mind-boggling policy that we would have in our tax code, something that rewards people for giving to private schools. What they had proposed last year was to increase it by $11 billion over 10 years. That's a huge amount of money. So they would have committed themselves to $11 billion in 10 years. They're not committed to anything for public education in the future, except this notion that is embodied in our Constitution that says they must fund an adequate public education. So as long as we're using terms like adequate public education and basic education, we're not going to really be able to make huge advances in our public education system. And then we have to compete with private schools where our tax dollars are going to compete against us. Another big issue for us last year, and will be again this year, is changes to the Teacher Keys Effectiveness System, which is the mandated teacher evaluation review process. It needs reform. There was a bill last year that we were took on as one of our own, sponsored by John Corbett, a Republican in down around Clinch County, Valdosta, Homersville, that would have taken the needs development rating and made it constructive, not punitive. So as I understand it, under current law, if you get 2 needs development ratings within 5 years, you can't get your teacher certification renewed. This would take away that punitiveness to needs development and make it more constructive. So we're seeing new teachers, for example, often get needs developments 2 and 5 years and have frustration that they can't get their certification, which probably also is contributing to the shortage of educators in many cases as well. So Representative Corbett has told us he'll be back with that bill again next year. We're excited about it. We've talked to him over the summer, so we'll be there to support that bill. It passed the House of Representatives last year overwhelmingly, like 165 to 5, and it passed the Senate Education Committee, but it never was brought to the Senate floor on the final day of the session. We aim to rectify that this year. Dr. Glass-Dixon, you have a question?
I heard that they're about to get rid of TEKS and there's going to a new evaluation system, which is supposed to be developed, being tested and by several counties. Are you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am. And we have had meetings with State Superintendent Richard Woods. There is what they're calling a pilot program that they're gonna, not all of the details have been released, but if I remember correctly, there are like 7 counties or 7 school districts rather. And I think they have to represent a spectrum of large to small and maybe include some city districts as well. But the goal of that is to see if they can develop a new and hopefully improved TEK system. I don't know if I'd go as far to say that they're getting rid of the current TEK system. They may, and that may be good, but the devil's in the details. But you may know that we supported Superintendent Woods for re-election. Yes. And met with him frequently during the summer on issues, and he is committed to GAE that we be a part of that process. So more and more information will come out now. The holidays are over, but we're sitting down to review the points of that pilot program, how it will be implemented, excuse me, and making sure that educators have a voice in the creation of that program. So yeah, there is a pilot program that should be unveiled at some point this year.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I talked about retirement benefits a little bit. And,
Joe, Calvin has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Do we know, Joe, which representative sponsored the bill to give tax breaks to the private schools?
Yeah, it was John Carson, who's our House Retirement Committee chairman. He's from Marietta.
Okay, you answered the next question though, so he's from Marietta.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Karen, were you in a meeting with him? With me? I can't remember. We had a group go down last session. He's ornery. He's an ornery man. Yeah, but we made him work hard last year.
Okay, we might need to
Say
we might need to get some letters out to him.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know that he'll be back with that bill this year. A version did pass that slightly increased the existing tax, but it was far short of what he had hoped for. And let me tell you, that was a great day during the conference committee, running back and forth between the House and Senate to try to kill it. And eventually we just watered it down significantly. But that tax credit, frankly, should be eliminated. But John Carson won't be the one to offer that bill. So we're talking a little. I got a couple things on retirement to let you know. One of our big initiatives this summer, we asked the Senate Retirement Chairman, Randy Robertson, who again is not going to be returning as retirement chairman, but we asked him to hold hearings on the retirement system that our school bus drivers, custodial staff, cafeteria workers, school maintenance personnel, to review their retirement benefits. Those ESPs fall into a retirement system called the Public School Employees Retirement System, PSERS, which is not a part of the TRS. It is actually under the ERS, which is the State Employees Retirement System. But the retirement benefits are just shockingly low. Maybe not shockingly if you think about how low many of those ESPs are paid, but the maximum you can get in retirement, even after 30 years as a school bus driver, is about $480 a month. Actually, it's less than that. I recalculated the other. It's like $425 a month. The average is about $285. I need to update my slide. So you think about the average ESP in retirement, even after 30 years system, is not getting even $300 a month. Is just gross, and needs to be changed. So we asked the chairman to look into it. He had 2 hearings. The last one was on a Saturday that we specifically asked for on a Saturday, so our ESP members could be there to share their stories. That was in Columbus. We had like 30 ESPs come from all across the state there. So we've got follow-up work to do there. There is a basic formula used to create to determine the benefit. It uses a multiplier of, I think, $16.75. They raised the benefit this year by a quarter. It needs much more than that. So we're advocating for a higher multiplier, and ask for additional study on whether ESPs in PSERS can possibly be brought into TRS. Now, that would probably, if it happened, work as an option, because the cost of joining TRS would be much, much more. But if there are school bus drivers and cafeteria workers and custodians and school maintenance folks that want to do that, and they want to pay the extra for that benefit, they should be allowed to do so. In many states, ESPs are a part of their teacher retirement system. So that's one thing we're working on. We'll see if
Joe, you have a couple questions, couple hands.
Yeah.
And then Deborah's iPhone.
Who's Deborah's iPhone?
It's Debbie Simons, long technical problems, but we'll just go with that. Joe,
Hey,
I
Debbie.
just wanted to mention that Dr. Evans, of course, was also in attendance down at that Columbus meeting.
Yeah.
He sang high praises for all GA staff, yourself, our leadership, Tony, Karen, all those people that went down to make presentations. He told me it was some of the best information and communication he had seen from anyone. So he felt that you all did an extremely positive, professional, good job on this, and to just keep it up, because that's the kind of information and the quality of testimony that we need to continue with on this. But I just wanted to make you know that Dr. Evans was extremely impressed with GA and all of our reps.
I appreciate that. That's great news. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. I was in Washington, D.C. I don't know if there's video of it, but I would love to watch it myself. But if this is something you're interested in, we've got pretty extensive talking points on it. Debbie's report confirms everything I heard, that our folks just did a really good job. And it just shows the power of personal testimony, of putting faces and real life stories to issues. That's how we can most effectively get things done. And also, just as a disclaimer, and Debbie knows this, advocating that ESPs possibly be a part of TRS is not something that we would advocate if we felt like it affected the solvency or the assets or the financial stability of TRS. It would have to be actuarially sound, which is why it would cost an ESP more if the General Assembly ever moved in that direction.
And
Linda?
Linda, yeah, thanks.
Yes, for just a minute. I also attended along with several retired members in Columbus, and to hear the testimony of how manipulative city boards of education can be when it comes to bus drivers and secretaries. They not only learned, what they did not know, and they had to look in the face of people that it affected. And moreover, we learned that these local systems have got to do better about their employees as well, considering that, because these testimonies were really riveting in terms of employees as human beings and how life changes make it inappropriate for them to even make so-called overtime with the scheduling that buses have in particular. But it was really a proud day for us. And on a side note, he had an assistant that he failed to introduce. And I had to ask him to please introduce the young lady who is assisting you as they do this actuarial study. And then, and when at the end of the meeting, she said, very seldom do they recognize us. So I said, well, now we understand some more of why they fail to recognize others. So I'm really proud of GAE, and whenever we can show our faces, we need to. Thank you.
2 meetings I want to have as soon as the session begins. One is with Senator Robertson. He may not be the retirement chairman, but he's carried this through. I want to know if he's got plans to act on it. And then the other senator that was there, I understand, was Larry Walker from around Perry, Georgia. And I'd be curious now or offline, Linda and Debbie, how you thought Senator Walker responded to the testimony, and whether he might be somebody who would be interested in carrying this issue forward. We'll visit offline. That's cool.
And Joe, is it not true that in systems that aren't paying into Social Security, the PSERS employees can also have their Social Security benefits reduced because of GPO WEP? So it's like a double whammy if you're in PSERS and pay part of a non-Social Security system.
Absolutely. Debbie?
Joe, I don't have specific information on on either one of those senators as far as their willingness to carry something forward. The only thing I know I can say is that Buster said that they were both senators were deeply moved and educated after that hearing down there. So it looks like there would be an open door to a discussion with either gentleman. And
Well, definitely will have that for sure.
yeah.
So let's get to the big retirement system, teachers' retirement system. I got more experts on the call than I can believe. But you know, just to recap, TRS is sacred to us. We will not tolerate significant changes to the defined benefit plan. One of the things that I learned from Blake Tillery in the Senate is that there may be what he considers a larger than normal appropriations for TRS this year. I imagine Buster and Debbie have been deeply involved with him as we get ready for the budget process, but you know, stock market's been a little crazy this year. There have been ups and there have unfortunately been some downs. And we have members of the General Assembly who focus in on those downs and are like Chicken Little screaming that the sky is falling, when in fact, we have one of the most fiscally responsible, stable teacher retirement systems in the country. So most of you know that a bill that fiscally impacts retirement benefits under TRS, those must be 2-year bills. So I'm concerned that this year we may see folks like Representative Chuck Martin from Alpharetta, who's really big on eliminating the defined benefit plan. He wants to do kind of a 401k type plan or some other privatization. I'm concerned that we may see those bills come this year. Debbie, is there anything you want to share on that?
Just to reiterate what you just indicated, we are unfortunately going to be going into this session with a negative, return for this year. However, we have statistics over a 50-year period that show that this is not that untypical and that the markets rebound and that our assets do increase proportionately. Just 2 years ago, we were up 24%. So what we have to make sure when we go into these discussions is that market volatility is a part of an expected history. And we're not going to be Pollyanna-ish about it, if there's such a term, but just to look at the realities of the economy and our history. And as you said, our deep pockets, our deep stability, our excellent funding policies in it. The discussion that we have continued to hear is that they being Tillery and Martin, aren't talking about current employees and current retirees. What they are talking about, new hires. We do have information on that shows that even if you change a DB plan to a DC plan for new hires, that will undermine the system. And we can prove that. We've got stats on it, but it's just something that people need to be aware of that are the current members. I do think, Joe, that some telling information will come out in the appropriations hearing. Dr. Evans has been placed very early on in that list of division directors to give his report and to be questioned. And Karen, I think that's going to be televised and that people can, get it online when the exact date and times are published. Am I correct that you would be able to share that information to the whole group, or Joe, you?
Yes, but we will publish it early and often.
Okay.
All-
And that's where I think we're going to get a flavor of how serious Tillery and perhaps others, because you know that's a large committee that is on appropriations, and we might be able to tell if there are other, representatives that are also going to be positive, towards that kind of thing. So I do think that that's going to be an early on hearing that's going to be very important for us to monitor. Of course, we don't have any ability to speak at those hearings, really. They're going after the division directors, and we'll just have to see how that plays out. So that's my recommendation. Watch it closely.
So for those that aren't familiar, again, just usually during the week of the Martin Luther King holiday, the appropriations committees will meet, and they'll have all state agencies and department heads come and basically make a presentation about their budget recommendations and field questions. So we'll definitely let everybody know. This is definitely something that we need to watch closely and be prepared to act on if it happens. Debbie, it's kind of interesting to me, for those that want a 401k plan or a defined contribution plan, it's not like the stock market would have excluded them. They would be subject to the same economics as everything else. So I don't know what they think they'd be solving by doing that.
The only thing that they want to solve is a continuation of a large contribution to that's required by actuaries, for the defined benefit program, which is what we have. So instead of contributing, I'm going to pick a number, 200 million a year, they could reduce their contribution to whatever they wanted. I mean, they could make a $1 million contribution a year. They would not be required to really fund an appropriate and decent retirement for anybody. And that's what we all saw what happened to our 401ks over the last year. If that was your only retirement, we would all be in a world of hurt. And they just what they're trying to do is figure out a way, some of them, to reduce their contribution to the state budget. And it's a significant contribution, but it's because it's a commitment, a legal commitment to those employed and retired by the state of Georgia in our retirement system. So that's what it is. It's bottom line. They're just trying to figure out a way to save money on the budget.
Thank you, Debbie. Last thing I want to mention is, like as I said before, waivers. The burnout study report from the Department of Education I mentioned talks about some of the stresses that are affecting educators, including large class sizes, lack of planning time. These are all things that are affected by waivers. And if you're not familiar with what we mean by waivers, it means this. The Georgia General Assembly can pass a law, the governor can sign it into law, and a school district can essentially ignore it. All they need to do to receive permission to ignore it is ask the State Board of Education, a non-elected board, for permission to ignore it. These requests are always approved. There's supposed to be some quid pro quo for scholastic improvement. We've yet to see that happen. But even the standards that they outlined for academic improvement are so weak that they're really meaningless. So we just have a free-for-all system where local school districts can essentially veto the action of the governor and the General Assembly by asking for permission to waive. And they can waive any law in Title 20, which is the public education section of the Georgia Code. And they do. They waive class sizes. They waive nepotism rules. They waive requirements of gifted and remedial programs. And class sizes says the easiest. There's a state law that says you can have no more than 35 kids in the English math student in high school. And yet we have teachers telling us every day that they've got 40, 42, 43 and more in their classrooms in these core classes. It's a real disservice to students. It's a real disservice to educators, and it needs to be changed. Just give you a little flavor of some of the other things that can be waived. Fair dismissal rights can be waived. That's critical. There are even school bus safety laws and bus driver pay that can be waived. Usually when they're waiving, as I understand it, special education or gifted program type things, they're waiving them to pack more kids in those classrooms so they don't have to hire more teachers, or because they can't hire more teachers because they're not offering enough money, and we're not incentivizing college students to consider a serious look at a career in public education. They could take, under the waiver system, the money that was passed for the purpose of giving pay raises to teachers and redirect it to landscaping at central office if they wanted to, because of these kind of waivers. So they can waive teacher certification. One of the things I'm concerned about this year, and we're seeing in other states, as a response to teacher shortages, they're waiving certification requirements or doing away with certification requirements in other states. Something we need to be on guard here in Georgia too. But a lot of the problems that we have in public education in Georgia have a relationship to this very unique and unfortunate system where school districts can just opt out of laws that they choose to opt out of. So it's going to be an interesting session. Every year new things come up that we're on nobody's radar. So I don't know, we had a lot of social issues last year from the Republicans. I'm hoping that kind of stuff is out of their system, but we'll see how things unfold. But you guys, as I said at the beginning, are so important to what we do down there, not only on retirement issues, on all issues in general. It's so nice to be able to count on you folks, and you've got great leadership and dedication, and I'm extremely grateful to each and every one of you. I'm happy to take any more questions, but I know you said there's a hard deadline, Karen.
Yep, and before Linda and Patrick, your questions, I'm gonna do the announcement portion of this. Joe, thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you with us, and I'm not sure we're all retired members today, since this went out to people who still may be on winter holidays and are active in public education. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I just want to put some things on your radar, and in the follow-up email I send to attendees, there'll be links to all of this. But if you haven't seen our Lobby and Learn conference that is happening this Saturday, not only will Joe be speaking there, but also Stephen Owens from the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. I always have to think what those letters are. He'll be speaking, and we just have a great program planned. It is 3 hours. It is by Zoom. Join us for any portion thereof. Also, if you are retired or if you're an active GAE member, we have a business meeting coming up to see what goes on in the GAE-Retired organization. We're going to do our day at the Capitol a little bit earlier in February than the GAE day at the Capitol. The idea is just so that we are trained as GAE-Retired. So when the GAE day at the Capitol happens later on that month, on February 23rd, we can help mentor with that. So that took me about a minute. So Patrick, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, Joe, all these laws that are happening with the vouchers and all, that's still being done by ALEC and all these people that wanted to destroy public schools. So that's one reason why the waivers and the lack of teachers coming in. I wanted to speak on that a second.
Is that a question?
I think Patrick's question was, is ALEC behind all the waiver stuff?
Yeah, a good bit of it, but also the Reason Foundation, Betsy DeVos, a lot of, they're actually and there's at least 3 organizations that operate in Georgia that they're pushing vouchers, the Georgia Opportunity Society or something like that.
It's designed to kill public education, from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, there are outside influences that are funding it, and they have a lot of money. They were very engaged during the campaign season, spending money on behalf of candidates, direct mailers. You know, both sides are at war. Fortunately, last year we won. We had this universal voucher bill that I talked about come up for a vote on the Senate floor. It got 20 votes for it and 29 against it. Now, I'm not going to pretend that it was just a straight up vote on vouchers. There are politics involved and trading, I'm sure, but fact is we won. In the House, we've built a really good coalition with some rural Republicans who understand vouchers are no benefit to their district. There are no private schools there, or they undermine the local public schools. So it's a critical issue for us, and one we're not going to give an inch on.
And Linda, you are over the 12:30 time limit, but go ahead because it's a new year.
Thank you, Karen. One big thank you to Joe, of course, and also to any of you that participated in the GAE-Retired legislative advocacy during this past election. It was very impacting. And from what I'm hearing with all of these new people that are coming aboard, we're going to have to do more telephone calls and let them hear our voices as we support retired issues as well as the young folk. And we'll keep you informed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you all for being on this call, on the Zoom, for taking your time. And together we will make public education and retirement issues better. So be informed, be knowledgeable, and thank you for being a GAE member and a GAE retired member if you are part of that group. So have a lovely day, stay warm and well, and hope to see you on February 1st for our next lunch bunch. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Great job. Thank you.
Great
Thank you
job,
very
Joe.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Happy New Year.